When the sun rose over Lake Texcoco, it did not simply illuminate a city, it ignited an empire. White temples shimmered like blades, drums echoed across the water, warriors marched beneath banners of emerald feathers and gold, merchants traded cacao, jade, and obsidian in markets larger than any Europe had ever seen. But at the top of the Great Pyramid, blood flowed. To outsiders, it would seem brutal. To the Aztecs, it was survival. Because they believed the world itself was fragile. They believed the sun could die, and only sacrifice could keep it alive. This was not just a civilization of warriors, it was a civilization built on cosmic balance, and its power was as magnificent as it was terrifying. Chapter 1: The Rise of Tenochtitlan. Before the pyramids rose above the lake, before gold dazzled foreign eyes, before fire consumed the city, there was only a wandering tribe. They called themselves the Mexica. They were not yet rulers. They were not yet feared. They were migrants, moving across the harsh landscapes of Mesoamerica, searching for a promised land foretold by their god Huitzilopochtli. For generations, the Mexica had wandered, driven from region to region, unwanted, outnumbered, considered outsiders by the powerful city-states that dominated central Mexico. But the Mexica carried something stronger than land. They carried belief. According to legend, their god had given them a sign. They were to build their great city where they saw an eagle perched on a cactus, devouring a serpent. It was a prophecy, a symbol, a destiny. And one day, around 1325, they saw it. On a small, marshy island in the middle of Lake Texcoco. The location seemed impossible. The land was swampy, unstable, surrounded by water. But the Mexica did not see weakness. They saw opportunity. An island meant protection. Water meant defense. Isolation meant survival. And so, against all odds, they began to build. They named the city Tenochtitlan. At first it was modest. Wooden structures, simple temples, bridges connecting small patches of land. But the Mexica were not ordinary settlers. They were engineers. They built chinampas, artificial floating gardens constructed from mud and vegetation layered over reed mats. These floating farms transformed shallow lake areas into fertile agricultural plots. Corn, beans, squash. Food became abundant. The city began to grow. Causeways were constructed, connecting the island to the mainland. Long stone roads crossing the water, with removable bridges for defense. Aqueducts carried fresh water into the city. Markets flourished. Temples rose. Within decades, Tenochtitlan transformed from a fragile settlement into a rising power. But the Mexica were still politically subordinate. They initially served as mercenaries for stronger city-states like Azcapotzalco. They fought wars for others. They learned strategy. They studied power. And they waited. Eventually, opportunity emerged. In 1428, the Mexica formed a powerful alliance with two other city-states, Texcoco and Tlacopan. This became known as the Triple Alliance. Together, they defeated Azcapotzalco, their former overlord. From that victory, the Aztec Empire was born. Though we call it the Aztec Empire today, the ruling power at its heart was Tenochtitlan. The Mexica had risen. Now expansion began. Aztec armies moved across the Valley of Mexico and beyond. Their warriors were disciplined and fierce. Elite units like the Jaguar warriors and Eagle warriors wore symbolic armor representing strength and divine power. Conquered territories were not always directly ruled. Instead, they paid tribute: gold, cacao, cotton, precious stones, exotic feathers. Tribute flowed into Tenochtitlan. Wealth accumulated. The city grew into one of the largest urban centers in the world, possibly housing over 200,000 inhabitants at its peak. To European eyes, centuries later, it would rival the great cities of Europe. At the center of the city stood the Templo Mayor, a massive double pyramid dedicated to two gods, Huitzilopochtli, god of war and the sun, and Tlaloc, god of rain. Religion was not separate from politics. It was power. The Aztecs believed the sun required nourishment, human blood, to continue rising each day. War was not only expansion, it was sacred duty. Captives taken in battle were offered in ritual sacrifice. a practice that shocked later European observers, though it must be understood within the spiritual worldview of the Aztecs. To them, sacrifice sustained the universe. The empire thrived under powerful rulers known as Tlatoani, great speakers. Among them, rulers like Itzcoatl and Huitzilopochtli expanded the empire dramatically. Then came Moctezuma II. Under his rule, the empire reached its height. Tenochtitlan was magnificent. Canals crisscrossed the city like veins. Markets bustled with thousands of traders. Temples gleamed in the sun. White limestone buildings reflected light across the lake. Visitors described the city as shimmering, almost unreal. And yet, beneath the beauty lay tension. The empire demanded tribute from dozens of subject cities. Some obeyed, some resented, some waited for weakness. Power built quickly can fracture quickly. Tenochtitlan had risen from mud and prophecy. It had become a jewel of Mesoamerica, but its dominance created enemies far beyond the horizon. Ships were approaching, men with steel, with horses, with unknown diseases. They did not yet know it. But the greatest test of the Aztec Empire was coming. The rise had been extraordinary. The fall would be catastrophic. In the next chapter, we will explore the religion, wealth, military might, and inner structure of Aztec society, and how the seeds of vulnerability were already planted within its greatness. The eagle had found its cactus. The empire had risen, but storms gather quietly before they strike. Chapter 2: Power, Gods, and Sacrifice. By the time Tenochtitlan reached its peak in the early 16th century, the Aztec Empire dominated vast regions of central Mexico. Its strength rested on three pillars: war, religion, tribute. These forces were inseparable. At the heart of Aztec belief stood Huitzilopochtli, the god of war and the sun. According to Aztec cosmology, the universe had already been destroyed 4 times. They believed they were living in the 5th sun, a fragile era sustained only by divine nourishment, and that nourishment was blood. Human sacrifice was not random violence, it was ritual, structured, sacred. Captured warriors were honored as offerings. In great ceremonies atop the Templo Mayor, priests would perform sacrifices meant to ensure the sun would rise again. To modern audiences, the practice is shocking, but to the Aztecs, it was existential. Without sacrifice, the cosmos would collapse. War, therefore, became sacred duty. Aztec military campaigns were not only about territory, they were about capturing prisoners for ritual. These were known as flower wars, conflicts designed specifically to obtain captives rather than annihilate enemies. Elite warrior societies rose to prominence: jaguar warriors, eagle warriors. Their armor symbolized strength and divine connection. Their status depended on how many prisoners they captured in battle. Military achievement translated into social power. The empire expanded outward in concentric waves. Cities that resisted were conquered. Cities that submitted paid tribute. Tribute lists were extensive and carefully recorded in codices: gold ornaments, turquoise mosaics, cotton textiles, cacao beans, exotic animal skins, brilliant quetzal feathers. Tenochtitlan became a magnet of wealth. At its center lay the great market of Tlatelolco, described later by Spanish observers as astonishing in scale and organization. Tens of thousands of people gathered daily: food vendors, craftsmen, jewelry makers, slave traders. Barter dominated, but cacao beans also functioned as currency. The city was orderly, clean, structured. Canals allowed canoes to glide between districts. Floating gardens produced surplus food. Aqueducts delivered fresh water. Waste systems managed sanitation. In many ways, Tenochtitlan rivaled the greatest cities on Earth. Yet power has a cost. The Aztec Empire was not a unified nation-state in the modern sense. It was a network of tributary states held together by military dominance. Many subject peoples resented the heavy tribute demands. Some were forced to provide sacrificial victims. Others were economically strained. Outwardly, the empire appeared invincible. Inwardly, tension simmered. At the top of this vast system stood Moctezuma II. He was not merely a king, he was considered semi-divine. He rarely touched the ground, he dined alone. Servants avoided looking directly at him. He ruled during the empire's golden age, but he also ruled at a moment of omen. Aztec records speak of strange signs in the years before the Spanish arrival: a comet blazing in the sky, a temple struck by lightning, a woman crying in the night, a lake that boiled. Whether myth or retrospective symbolism, these stories reflect something deeper, a sense of impending change. Moctezuma expanded tribute networks and strengthened religious rituals. He believed in cosmic order. But beyond the eastern horizon, a different force was approaching. In 1519, Hernán Cortés landed on the Gulf Coast of Mexico. He brought steel swords, firearms, horses, animals unknown in the Americas, and disease. But even more powerful than weapons was strategy. Cortés quickly learned that many tribes resented Aztec dominance. He formed alliances with enemies of Tenochtitlan, most notably the Tlaxcalans. The empire's greatest weakness was not foreign steel. It was internal division. Meanwhile, smallpox spread ahead of Spanish forces. Indigenous populations had no immunity. Entire communities were devastated before major battles even began. The Aztecs had built temples to sustain the sun, but they could not defend against invisible enemies. As Cortés marched inland, Moctezuma faced an impossible decision: confront the strangers immediately, or attempt diplomacy. He chose caution. Perhaps he believed they were linked to prophecy. Perhaps he believed he could control the encounter. History would prove otherwise. The empire stood at its height. Gold gleamed, drums thundered, sacrifices continued atop the pyramid. But the balance was shifting, not because the Aztecs were weak, but because their world was about to collide with another. In the final chapter, we will witness the arrival of Cortés in Tenochtitlan, the capture of Moctezuma, the uprising, the siege, and the devastating fall of one of the most magnificent cities ever built. The Empire of the Sun had reached its zenith. Now, the shadow was approaching. Chapter 3. The Fall of Tenochtitlan. When Hernán Cortés first saw Tenochtitlan in 1519, he could hardly believe his eyes. A city rising from water, white temples gleaming under the sun, causeways stretching across the lake like stone spears, markets louder and more organized than any he had seen in Spain. He later wrote that it was like something from a dream, but dreams can turn into nightmares. Moctezuma II welcomed the Spaniards into the city. Why? Historians still debate. Did he believe Cortés was linked to prophecy? Did he underestimate the threat? Did he hope diplomacy would prevent war? Whatever the reason, the Spaniards entered Tenochtitlan peacefully. At first, Cortés quickly understood something crucial. He could not defeat the Aztecs alone. But he did not need to. Thousands of indigenous allies marched beside him, tribes who resented Aztec tribute demands and ritual sacrifices. The empire's strength had created enemies. Inside the city, tension grew. The Spaniards were astonished by Aztec wealth, especially gold. They demanded more. And then, in a calculated move, Cortés seized Moctezuma, the emperor of the Aztecs, held hostage in his own palace. It was a stunning reversal. The semi-divine ruler now a prisoner. For months, Cortés ruled through Moctezuma, attempting to maintain order. But the fragile balance shattered in 1520. While Cortés temporarily left the city to confront a rival Spanish force sent to arrest him, his lieutenant Pedro de Alvarado made a catastrophic decision. During a major Aztec religious festival, Spanish soldiers attacked unarmed nobles and priests inside the sacred temple precinct. The massacre ignited fury. The city erupted. When Cortés returned, Tenochtitlan was no longer calm. It was rebellion. Aztec warriors surrounded the Spanish compound. Streets became battlegrounds. Bridges were destroyed. Food ran low. Moctezuma attempted to calm his people, speaking from a palace balcony. But stones and spears were thrown. He was gravely wounded. Soon after, he died. Whether killed by his own people or by the Spaniards remains debated. The symbolic heart of the empire was gone. The Spanish attempted escape. On the night of June 30th, 1520, later known as La Noche Triste, they tried to flee the city under darkness. But the Aztecs were ready. As Spaniards crossed the causeways, Aztec warriors attacked from canoes and rooftops. Many Spaniards drowned in the lake, weighed down by stolen gold. Hundreds died. It was one of the worst defeats in Spanish conquest history. But the war was not over. Cortés regrouped. He strengthened alliances. He built brigantines, small ships, to control the waters of Lake Texcoco. And then he returned. The siege of Tenochtitlan began in 1521. It was relentless. The Spaniards and their indigenous allies cut off food supplies. They destroyed aqueducts. They advanced methodically along the causeways, house by house, canal by canal. Meanwhile, smallpox ravaged the city. The disease had arrived months earlier, carried unknowingly by Europeans. With no immunity, the Aztec population suffered catastrophic losses. Warriors weakened, leaders died. Entire districts fell silent. The combination of siege and disease was devastating. Tenochtitlan, once a masterpiece of engineering and power, began to crumble. Temples burned, canals filled with debris, bodies lay in the streets. After months of resistance, the last Aztec emperor, Cuauhtémoc, was captured on August 13, 1521. The city fell. The empire ended. The Spanish dismantled Tenochtitlan and built Mexico City atop its ruins. The temples were destroyed, stones repurposed, sacred sites erased, but not entirely. Because empires do not vanish without leaving echoes, the Aztec Empire had risen from prophecy. It had dominated central Mexico through military strength and religious conviction. It had built one of the most extraordinary cities of the pre-modern world, and it fell not because it lacked courage, but because it faced a convergence of forces: foreign weapons, political alliances, disease, internal resentment. The story of the Aztecs is not one of simple brutality or simple victimhood. It is a story of complexity, of power, of faith, of ambition, of collision between worlds. When the Spaniards arrived, they believed they had conquered a savage civilization. But history tells a different story. They had destroyed a sophisticated empire of engineers, astronomers, warriors, and priests. They had ended a world and begun another. The eagle had once perched on a cactus, devouring a serpent. That symbol still appears today on the flag of Mexico, because though the empire fell, its identity endured. Empires rise, empires fall, but civilizations leave marks deeper than stone. Tenochtitlan is gone, yet beneath modern Mexico City, the ancient foundations remain, and so does the legend of the Aztec Empire.